Well, it sounded to me like the Federal Reserve is running out of good excuses to stay hawkish. Hey everybody, Damon Roberts here with a little recap video of what we saw today. I want to thank everybody for joining me on the stream. And let's recap what we heard from the Federal Reserve today, because like I said, it seems like the Federal Reserve was running out of good excuses to try and stay hawkish. Energy costs have retreated, prices of core goods have declined, and the housing market is cooling. The last of the high and volatile prices is the wage-sensitive category of core services ex housing, but even that wasn't enough to keep Jerome Powell as hawkish as he probably wanted to seem today, and markets and risk assets responded. That's right. Every time Powell had the chance today to lean into hawkishness, he seemingly bailed out. For the second straight meeting, the very first question he was asked at the press conference was whether he was worried about the rally creating easier financial conditions that could hamper his inflation fight. And once again, he chose to really not push back very hard. He said, quote, "Our focus is not on short-term moves, but on sustained changes to financial conditions," he said. Now, if you remember back to Jackson Hole, the Jackson Hole hawk, well, he seems to have given way to a more dovish Jerome Powell today. The one-word change from the pace of future rate hikes to the extent of future rate hikes, that to me says a lot. And what that tells us is when we get the minutes from this FOMC meeting that they just had, when we get these next month, we'll get the minutes for this meeting, I think it's likely to read that officials have begun to debate whether this is it, whether to pause these rate hikes altogether. If you ask me today, I think there's a very good possibility that this is the last rate hike we may see from the Federal Reserve. They could most likely be done raising interest rates this cycle, but they just want everybody to believe otherwise. And that's what Powell was trying to do today. Since the last FOMC meeting, though, on December 14th, a lot has changed for markets. While the dollar is lower, bonds are flat, gold, stocks, crypto, all risk assets have certainly rallied strongly. Inflation is decelerating. We all know that. Deflationary forces are starting to be seen, and the manufacturing sector is in recession. The Institute for Supply Management said Wednesday that its gauge of factory activity signaled that output is the weakest since 2009 and that 15 of 18 industries experienced a decline in business. With this hike today, interest rates are finally at a level that can be considered restrictive or restraining and not promoting economic activity. At 4.75%, the upper end of the central bank's target for the federal funds rate, it now exceeds the Fed's preferred measure of inflation, which of course is the core personal consumption expenditures price index. That figure came in last week at an annualized 3.9% in the fourth quarter, according to the Commerce Department. It's the first time that rates can now be considered to be restrictive since 2019, when everyone was expecting an imminent recession back then. Now, what does this mean for you? Well, even a small increase today will make it more expensive to buy homes, buy cars, or carry any credit card balance. So you and I are not going to necessarily see any relief from this. If anything, we're still going to see increases. We know what food prices are still like. Gas prices are still elevated from when Biden took office. Even with inflation cooling, rates and prices remain high. And so you still need to adjust your medium and long-term financial plans to weather this kind of rate environment, very high rate environment, and it's probably going to stay there for most of 2023. Even if the Fed is done raising, we know that their option is to keep rates high for longer, even though some say that maybe we see some rate cuts by the end of the year. The Fed pushed back on that today. The cost of borrowing money won't be dropping anytime soon. Now, as far as real estate goes, the average rate on the 30-year fixed mortgage has been trending down, driven in part by lower home prices and driven by decreased demand. The average rate on the 30-year dropped to 6.13% for the week of January 26th. A year ago, that same rate was at 3.5%. The Fed's hikes represent the highest rate increases in well over a decade, 450 basis points alone just this year. But as Fed Powell told us today multiple times, the disinflation process has started. The 2-year yield slide today, absolutely screaming out to the Fed, you've done enough. Today, the slide, as we were watching it live, as much as 12 basis points down to 4.08, while the 10-year touched 3.38% today. The dollar index, the DXY, continues to fall to its lowest level since April. If Jerome Powell continues to sidestep questions, market optimism will continue to blossom into 2023. All right, folks, there you go. Quick recap of what we saw today in the FOMC meeting and Jerome Powell's interview. Some pretty good questions. Of course, we had repetitive questions over and over, same people asking the same questions. But overall, I would say a much more bullish Jerome Powell press conference than we thought we were going to get. All right, that's going to do it for this one. Make sure you visit our sponsor, MyPillow.com. MyPillow.com. Use our promo code LFS6B at checkout for buy one, get one free of the new MyPillow 2.0. And I'll see you in the next one, everybody.